Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back to our second episode of Don't Drink and Draw, or DDnD. And today we're going to do some werewolf art. And we've got with us our usual co-host is Brosy. And
How's it going?
also we've got a special guest, Dean Page from Picture Books Productions.
Hey,
So
good to be here. So what are we going to be doing here?
so we're just drawing some werewolf art. And
Yeah, you got a podcast, not a podcast, a comic book that revolves around a werewolf. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got a comic book called The Return of Jake Sunrise. It's a 6-issue anthology where we follow a werewolf vaquero in kind of a weird West world where we mix kind of horror with a Western in a fictional world. But it's pulled heavily from historical events and stuff like that. And the main character is a werewolf. But there's also going to be witches and cultists and, like a Frankenstein's monster and cannibal mutant hillbilly, stuff like that.
The hills have eyes, sort of things.
Yeah. That's the first issue. I'm a suburban boy. So like one of the scariest things to me is being stuck in the middle of nowhere.
That's where I live, is in the middle of nowhere. So that's a daily reality for me.
Yeah, it's an unreasonable fear. It's just
I can concur. It is the same.
Right. It's just rooted in my childhood, I guess.
Right. My dad grew up in Tennessee, so I'm probably directly descended from some of those.
The blue-skinned folk. You ever see that? The guys that are out in the middle of nowhere so long and like they have something's wrong with their diet or something and their skin starts turning blue.
They have a pigment issue due to their inbreeding. That's actually the group of people that was directly based off the Hills Have Eyes, but it was loosely based around because we know how that story went, and it's completely different to what actually happened.
I had no idea that was a real thing.
Oh no,
it absolutely is.
I don't know if there's a disorder that people have. I feel somewhat bad about this because I gawked. I was in the middle of Pennsylvania recently at like a Renaissance festival, and one of the cashiers, she was blue. Like I had to get my friends, and like I felt bad, but I was like, "Is that person blue?" And they were like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh my god, I've heard of that, but I've never seen it."
That's nuts.
Was it like body paint? Like really good body paint?
No. This is a very old school traditionalist kind of area, people. It's kind of near we have like Amish people and such around where we are. Well, not exactly where I am, but if you go about 2 hours east or west.
Yeah, we've got a large community not too far from here called Yoder, and it's like they sell like the best furniture and meat like ever.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were at their place because they had a bunch of awesome food and stuff. Man, so I'm watching this picture that you're drawing of a werewolf. It's looking really cool, and it was funny because once you put the tail, one of the things I thought about was like, what does the werewolf in your head look like? Is it one of those ones that has tails? Because some don't.
Right.
I think a tail would be like an important distinguishing feature of like, what is this thing? Does it have a tail? It's probably a werewolf. If it doesn't have a tail, it's probably, more in the realms of, maybe it's a little bit more human than it is dog kind of thinking.
Yeah, like a wolf man.
Right. I think the tail's kind of like one of the distinguishing features of a werewolf, right? The big floopy wolf tail.
I mean, I think so too, but when you look at some of these drawings, and some of the, not drawings, but some of the ones in movies, you see some pretty freaky ones. There's like the emaciated type of werewolf where like you can see their ribs and like they look like very like sickly. Then there's the ones that are like more buff.
You got the distinguishment from, ever raging hunger to I am the monster you fear sort of vibe.
Right.
The werewolf that, hits the gym on a 9-to-5 basis.
I mean, yeah, it's like very seldom do you see like a dog that doesn't have really good muscle tone. So I feel like any werewolf would be like pretty buff with no effort really on their part.
I mean, we're talking about dogs here. These things are based off of wolves. Like
Right.
wolves
Right.
are
Even more
impressively powerful. Like German shepherds, really strong. They'll drag you down the street if they want to. Wolves are twice as big and 3 times as strong, basically.
Yeah.
See,
So,
that's the thing. Like if you haven't seen a wolf up close, it's like they've never seen a pony and a horse,
Right.
a German
Yeah.
Shepherd and a wolf.
They're so much bigger than what you think they are.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
they're
and I've heard that in the original folklore that it was supposed to be like you turn into a full wolf.
in
Yeah.
different in older mythology, like older European stuff, it was directly like you are now a very scary wolf, like a big wolf, if I recall correctly. But eventually it like derived into, a big half man, half wolf thing.
Yeah, I hate to give the Twilight series credit for anything, but I really thought the werewolves were very cool in that. Because they did turn into just big wolves, right?
Oh, and that was something else I've heard about too. Because they just turned into really big wolves. Was the idea of a pack, and are they in a pack, and that's very much a modern convention that they used to more just be solo.
Yeah, most werewolves I've seen have either like in stories they're always a lone wolf sort of thing. But I always find it like an entertaining thing to like when you're running a D&D game or something like that, and you come across a werewolf and you like with all your might stop this thing. Everyone's bleeding, everyone's wounded, and you hear the rest of them show up. That's what's really terrifying with that scene is like, oh God, there's more, and they're angry. That would be a more terrifying aspect, is just the heroes managed to stop this one scourge here, and turns out there's like 12 more, and they're hungry.
And that makes a lot of sense to me because, like between a feline and a canine, a feline's going to win if they're the same size. Every day of the week, the strength of a canine comes from its pack power.
Yeah,
right?
it's
your domesticated howcat, it would kill and eat you if it could.
Yes.
Right. It's just like they're small, so they can't.
I mean, if you look at the numbers on house cats and how much they kill, like birds, songbirds, and all that sort of stuff, it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Well, and then the next thing too with the werewolf is, what does their muzzle look like? Like I'm looking at you messing with the muzzle right now in the drawing.
Oh yeah,
in the drawing.
It's got a really large nose.
This is
right.
This is what I like to call the ugly period of the artwork, where like you don't really know where it's going to go yet, and you just kind of mess around and experiment. And like the finished wolf actually looks quite a bit different than what we see here. But
well, you completely redid the legs from the beginning. I thought the legs at the beginning looked cool, and then you just completely got rid of them and did them.
Just got rid of the.
Oh yeah, dude. Here we go with the face, right? All new face.
Right, you just got rid of that completely.
Yeah, because like that's not working out. We're gonna do something else. And at some point this started to look like Master Splinter. So
I can see it. One thing that like I find interesting is I've seen some werewolf like imagery and like media come out as like like not actually like most media that we see on like werewolves is a lot more wolf than it is were, I guess to say. But like I've seen some of them that come out and it's like no, this guy is only 80% human and 20% wolf, where previously it's like a 40-60 mix, where like it's more man, but
like the old Wolfman movie, right? Where just kind of a dude with a hairy face. Yeah,
kind of the idea.
Well, and then what about an Underworld?
That was something I was going to bring up. I love the werewolves in Underworld. That and Van Helsing too, the werewolf design.
I like the werewolves in Van Helsing. I am just filling up my Google search bar with just different topics here.
Well, the Underworld ones look different. All the different pictures to me look different. Maybe they're not actually pictures from Underworld.
Yeah, I'm
Do
looking
they
at
have like
these.
shorter snouts? They look like they have kind of shorter snouts in the pictures
They
I'm
did,
seeing.
but it was
Yeah,
it was the legs in Underworld for me. The way that they built the werewolf's legs were so cool.
Yeah, the legs I'm looking at here
Oh, I can't see any legs.
are quite interesting. Like
'Cause they had that
they're almost like
almost like the rear legs on a horse, honestly, because they were so long. That's in my memory. That's how they were.
Oh,
like
I see.
the
But it made
like
them
the
so tall and intimidating, though.
yeah, like the torso looks like the normal size of a human, sorta, but like the legs are just like like double the length, from what I see.
Yeah, my guess is that one of the main reasons why they switched the idea in popular culture of like a werewolf from being on all fours is just so that it could be bigger than a person.
I think that's got some validity because like a thing on all fours, you really don't see the size until it stands up on two, and
Yeah.
you realize that like, oh, this four-legged thing, it's pretty large. This thing now stands up, and oh my god, this thing is 9 feet tall.
It's like a
Well,
like a
have you
grizzly
seen-
bear, right? It's
have
like
you
Yeah.
seen
cuddly.
grizzly bears are gigantic, right? And then even on all fours, they're like a Volkswagen Bug.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they
All right.
stand up, right? And they keep on standing up for some time.
All right, this is a fun little question. Who would win in a fight, a polar bear or a werewolf?
Oh, come on.
Well, I think like it's tough because the werewolf is like magical, so I
Yeah.
assume that they could win.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the other thing too is it depends on how people rate all these different things or and how they're trying to perceive it. Are they perceiving it as like if they were real, like they're trying to be scientific about it, trying to be realistic about it?
Yeah.
Like what's their
I mean,
goal?
I don't think polar bears have silver, so I think they're
No,
kind
but
of screwed.
I don't
Well,
I don't know
you
that
could do your werewolf lore without silver.
yeah.
Because silver is also a pretty new invention.
That's fair.
But
Oh, that's
I don't think a werewolf weighs 2,000 pounds either,
Jeez, is that how big they are?
right? Polar bears are massive.
Polar bears are scarily
I mean-
large. I don't think 2,000 pounds, but that's
Like
that's not out of the realm of possibility if they
the
weren't
beluga
starving
whale.
to death.
The beluga whale is a normal part of a polar bear's diet.
They can weigh up to 1,700.
I
Yeah,
would have
they're-
to look that up. Hold on.
My guess is that but we'd want a big one to go up against him. We're not going to pick an average guy.
Right.
Well, and then sometimes they're gigantic, right? Then sometimes werewolves can be 3 or 4 times the size of humans if that's how you want to portray them. But like, have you seen Werewolf by Night?
The new Marvel edition?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did watch that. I love the
They,
old black and white look that it had.
They redid it in color. Did you see it? I haven't seen it.
I didn't watch it because I'm like, no, I want the black and white one. I love that Alfred Hitchcock look.
Well, plus, the werewolf design for that is not my favorite.
It wasn't my favorite either, but I felt like it added to that old, like 1940s nickel cinema kind of look and feel.
It did. They're trying to make it more like Wolfman. But I don't know that my recollection is that Werewolf by Night never looked like that. At least maybe he did in the very, very beginning, but not in the times that I read him. Like I started reading Werewolf by Night in the back of Marvel Comics Presents. And I thought he just looked like a wolf. Or maybe a little bit more snouty, but not kind of a flat. He looked more like a human face with big teeth.
The look of the Werewolf by Night looks a lot more fuzzy in comparison, but it looks like the comic book design looks a lot more like muscular, like this is a power lifter sort of body build.
And his face was like the head of a wolf. A lot of the ones I saw.
Like I'm looking at like the comic book stuff right now.
To me, I think you got to have like the long muzzle, right? Because it's so much more imposing and intimidating. It
just looks cooler, yeah.
Yeah. They should be terrifying, not like man, you got kind of a weird face, guy.
Right. Like I don't want supernatural and the occult to come off like it's making fun of ugly people or disabled people or people with like, because there are people that have like hair conditions.
Uh-huh.
And that's how some people try to make their werewolves. Sometimes intentionally, and I'm like, come on, don't do that. Like, and plus, you're right. Like, it doesn't even look as cool. A giant werewolf, like human body with a head of a wolf scrapped on top is pretty intimidating.
A werewolf shouldn't look like a disfigured human. It should look like something out of your nightmares.
Yeah,
because like that's like something that invokes fear, like something also, that's stalking you in the night.
It's like a curse, right? So it's not like a disorder. Right. It's like something that happened on purpose, right? The werewolf curse has purpose. It wasn't just some like weird freak anomaly.
That's why I kind of like the that's why, even though it's not my favorite at all, it's probably one of my least favorites. I respect like the emaciated looking werewolf because it's like a curse.
Yeah.
The eternal hunger. You must feed.
Man, this thing is such a different pose than it was when you started.
You what?
It's so different than when you started. Like the only things that you kept were like the arms and the chest.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes, though. I mean, really, like this was really only like one drawing. Usually, if you're trying to do a book cover, like you might do 4, 5, 6 drawings like this first.
And this is probably just easier than thumbnailing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what were we saying, Randy?
Oh no, go ahead. I think Brosy had a track that he wanted to get onto there. So,
I got sidetracked by reading on things. I would have to step back to remember what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I love that hand in the front too.
Yeah,
it's just like so much bigger. Like the foreshortening on it is really cool.
Yeah, I was like, I was really surprised at that hand. It really just kind of came out very quickly, but it's like those foreshortened hands sometimes are kind of a bear. So yeah, this is kind of a weird coloring technique that I'm doing on this art too. So it's gonna look like nothing for a minute.
Okay.
Are you in a different layer? Why is it all darker?
I am on a different layer because I'm gonna abandon that whole kind of penciled layer here in a little bit.
Is this like an experimental technique or something, or is it like?
Oh no, this
something
is
inside Photoshop.
I'm just using like a soft brush in Photoshop right now to just kind of block in some tones and values. But like this technique's not really unusual. A lot of people do it.
Okay.
So
you mentioned in your comic book that there were witches. This upcoming issue, does that revolve around witches, and what's their relationship with Jake Sunrise?
Yeah, so there's some witches and there's some cultists, and they're both kind of, everyone's after the same thing. And I guess in this issue, Jake Sunrise is somewhat less of like a transporter, or he's more of a transporter and less of a bounty hunter. If anyone ever saw that movie with Jason Statham, where he's trying to,
It's been a while. I think I did see the transporter though. That's where
it's like he's got a person he's got to protect.
Yeah, they're like in the trunk half the movie, I think.
Escort mission.
Yeah,
any video game escort mission.
No, right, it's like an escort mission.
Totally. Like he's not like he wasn't supposed to look at the package, and the package was a person in a box in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
But escort mission is probably a much better way to put it.
Just hopefully they don't run in the middle of gunfire and things like that, like video game AI does.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen a Jason Statham movie that was different than every other Jason Statham movie.
No, pretty much if you've seen one, you got the idea.
Yeah.
And if you like it, you can see more. That's good news.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like I don't dislike Jason Statham movies. It's just kind of they're all the same.
Oh yeah.
They found a formula that works
to different degrees. Although the movies that got him started are much different. Like if you've seen Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Oh yeah, that's going way back.
But so the witches, my thing with them was My thing when approaching all supernatural is that like a lot of supernatural has a tendency to like, I don't know, just kind of poke fun at the wrong things. Do you know what I mean? Or be disgusted by the wrong things.
You would have to elaborate on that for me.
So like I'm more interested in how horrifying what happened to the Native Americans is than I am about, some Europeans stumbling on a burial ground and then they have to run from these ghosts. You know what I mean? And a lot
in a way, yeah.
And so I like to really kind of lean into a lot of opposites than the way it is. So like for me, witches just naturally aren't the bad guys. Like they're almost like the horror version of Jedi. You know what I mean? They're the closest thing you're going to get in a horror story, at least in my mind. That's how I think of witches, because they're connected to nature. Although, there is the whole idea that they're connected to like,
it's like look out, man! They're stuff like that. They're making candles. Watch out!
Right? So there's all the myths that they're connected to demons, but to me, that's more of
modern occultism.
Propaganda.
Honestly.
Right, it's like the propaganda.
Like, what's the guy's name? His name's Crowley, but he's an actual individual.
Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
He ended up, from what I understand, like the origin of like his basically rise to fame is he basically took from a bunch of random religions different symbolism. Is like, yes, that is mine, and like all of the stuff is originally just like from other religions and things like that, and they mean exactly the opposite or completely different than what he's used them as. So like he's the founder of like a sort of pseudo modern occultism, but like he's not the founder of like the meanings and things that are there. If you look farther back, like a lot of that stuff is like different like religions that didn't mean any of that.
Right, a lot of it's just based off misinterpretations.
Exactly. So I don't know.
Well, usually, I mean, there's this old video game Thief. You guys ever play that game?
No, doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, I love these old games where like you get to sneak around. Those are always my favorite. And like it turns out there's really no good guys, but instead of having like a religion with a cross like Christians, it's a religion with a hammer, and they're all about like being the builders. And they're kind of this like feudalistic oppressive society, and like I don't know if it's like neo-feudal or what, like in the future, if it's in the past.
Average dwarf empire.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, all their metaphors about a god relate to him being a builder and having nails and having the right tools, stuff like that. And then you start seeing these little nature spirits. And like that's the thing. And I think that is the thing that makes people scared of nature. And I think a werewolves is like connected to the nature side of like horror. Because I think horror has a lot of different elements. Some of it could be, death, where it's like vampires or zombies. But I think werewolves more fit into that nature biting back, nature fighting back sort of thing.
It's like interesting that you say that, because I always like thought of things like werewolves as being like kind of like just the dark side of like man's nature as it is.
I think that's the best metaphor for them.
I think those are both interesting. The first thing that came to mind is Dark Souls is a game I play a lot of, but originally like the Void was not like brutal and hostile, but like during the games it's like volatile and dangerous, and it's like directly through the influence of man. So my first thing was like, werewolves are directly like the void of like human like ambition and like manipulation has caused like this one simple thing like nature to become more volatile, and that's the presence of the werewolf.
That is actually, that's a really good, I definitely agree with that. I think that very similar. That's kind of how I picture it, where it's like our natural impulses repressed and to the point that like they become freakish,
where they just like fester and get like malignant and just spread in a caustic manner.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think horror without psychological connection I don't really think that that's never. It can be fun, but I don't really think it's as interesting.
Well,
I think
that's what you see so much in modern horror movies. It's like they're all just gore and jump scares and really nothing else.
Yeah, that's not horror. That's just some guy painting gore and trying to scare you, like, ooh, jump scare. But like real horror is like, real horror gets deeper than that. Like, it's what it makes you scared, and it tries to pull that little fishing hook with like needle precision, just get that right angle. It's like, are you scared of the dark? Why are you scared of the dark? Here's a reason to be scared of dark, sort of thing, like that. Like, not just it's dark, scary.
I don't really see myself as competent enough of a writer to do horror yet, because I don't really think about horror very often. So I mean, my story is more of like a horror world, and I definitely want to get into thinking of more scary stories, because the question I always ask is like, it's like you're saying, like, what makes a good horror story is like, are you checking your back in the dark after you watch the movie?
Yeah,
gosh, that could make some really interesting like younger Jake Sunrise stories where he's like just getting used to his curse and like maybe he does some bad things.
I would definitely love to do a lot more body horror too. When he's younger, because where these stories are more like he's already an established character in the world. A lot of people even kind of know who he is. There's like because back in the during the Wild West, there were contemporaneous fictional stories being written about people who were still alive, like and they'd get released in dime novels back east.
Right. That reminds me, like, this is completely harebrained off topic, but the during the Zodiac movie about the Zodiac Killer was still alive during that movie, because they found out who he was years afterwards, and they found out he died only a few years prior. So he was old enough to see the movies about him.
I wonder what he thought about it. I wonder if he went to the theater and saw it.
Like, if I was that kind of a serial killer and they made a movie about me, I would definitely go to the theater to see that.
I would own all the merchandise if there was merchandise.
Exactly. Like, I would, like, you do something to glorify yourself as like this omniscient, terrifying threat. He is everywhere all the time and smarter than the police. Of course, I would, like, have my own merchandise in my house. That would be a waste of, like, my own ambition. So, I have another question. Our previous episode was about doppelgangers, and one of the topics we covered on is like their transformation between, person to alien-esque individual. So how would you describe Jake Sunrise's transformation into a werewolf? Is it like super body horror, or is it like Beast Boy and Teen Titans where it just happens?
Well, in the first issue, I didn't even let the audience see the werewolf, just a silhouette of it. Not even the transformation. And then in the second issue, you still don't see the transformation. You just see the werewolf coming out of nowhere. In the third issue, you see the transformation, and it's definitely more body horror, but also like I wanted it to have a mystical look to it. I didn't want it to look like it was just a transformation. Like he emits kind of like a yellow, or like a greenish steam, sort of. To just kind of give it that sense of it being a curse, more than it being necessarily just a part of who he is. Because I think, and that's another question too, is like, if you look at Twilight, they have werewolves, they're born that way, right? They're like a species. And I mean, that's cool, and people can do whatever they want. The story's going to always be interesting if it's a good story.
Yeah, but it's a very clean process when they transform too.
Right, because they're used to it. It's part, right? Like, right. I think if it's a curse, you can't make it a smooth transition. Have you seen ones? I've seen some really crazy ones though, where like the werewolf comes out of the mouth, like the human's head goes back almost like a snake, and it's just like it forces out, like it's a totally separate thing that's inside of you.
Yeah,
I guess
that's
that would
creepy.
emphasize the curse inside. I know in like Dungeons and Dragons stuff like that, there's an absolute difference between like you're cursed with lycanthropy or you're born with lycanthropy. Where you're cursed with lycanthropy, you just have next to no control. You might have a little bit later in your life, but nowhere near as much control as you being born with it, because it's symbiotic at that point. You and the curse per se, like, are one and the same. There is no separation where, let's say your parents, like, they're both werewolves, they were all both cursed with it. Now it's like, now their curse, it has them on a leash, where the child is now like, I am now the same as my curse. What about it? Sort of thing like that.
I think
So
it
I guess,
ultimately it's going to wind up boiling down to like how you're going to use that as a storyteller, as a device. Because the real
Yeah.
question to me really is like does your character want to be a werewolf or not?
Like,
Right, and that drives a lot of your symbolism, and a lot of your themes, and all, like.
So is it a willful transformation, or is it a horrific, body jarring, destructive process?
I like a good story, so every time I've played a werewolf in D&D, which has been a handful of times, I have always elected to go the cursed route. Whether that be like I am forced to deal with environments I'm not used to, because like, challenging roles and things like that, that's always fun. It's never fun to be like, oh yes, I'm a werewolf, I can just transform at will. What does that give you? And it's like, it makes me powerful. That's all it does. It's not a fun narrative.
Yeah, you need conflict.
Yeah, does your character like being a werewolf? Does he feed into it? Does he like prepare for his transformation like at the full moon, like it's a ritual or a ceremony? Or is he like there was a game that was a flash game. It was called Don't Starve, and the entire premise of was you're a werewolf, and the full moon was coming out, and you had to prepare yourself to not escape the house with your transformation and kill a bunch of people. And you basically had to like put hooks on meat, tie yourself down, and things like that to make sure you didn't get out. Is your character abhorrent by the idea of lycanthropy, so you do that level of work to stop yourself? Or are you like, yes, I will bask in the glory of my curse and pray to the moon right before it rises, and you transform and you just rampage?
So I don't think Jake requires a full moon to transform, does he?
Well, not right now, not in these stories, because in these stories he's more mature with it. So and he also has a way of kind of controlling it. Because for Jake Sunrise, it's more about like he keeps it in control through his addictions, essentially. Like he uses opium. That was like a big thing. Not necessarily among men; it was more women that were using it back in the Old West. But so he goes that route. And
what does the opium do exactly for Jake Sunrise?
It's kind of a depressant. So like it can kind of keep down the angrier, the more aggressive, negative emotions. So that way he can control it.
It's almost like Hulk in a way.
Yeah.
Right. And then when he wants to point it at something, he just kind of separates himself from his addiction, and then he can kind of point it at a target.
All right, guys. Well, we're actually running over quite a bit for a lot of time, so we probably better call this off for the night. But before we go, Dean, do you want to tell us where we can find more of Jake Sunrise?
Yeah, I got a website, Picture Books Productions. You can check it out there. You can order it directly from there. That's always my favorite if you do that. But I'm doing a Kickstarter right now for issues 3 and 4. But you can also pick up, still have some black and whites left of issue 1, but we're sold out of all the colors. And then there's a bunch of number 2s left as well. So you can but each story is self-contained. So anyone that wants can either just go to the Kickstarter, look up Return of Jake Sunrise, or check out Picture Books Productions.
All right. When does that current campaign end?
April 20th.
April 20th. So you got till April 20th to get in on that, or look out in the future. You can follow Dean Page on Kickstarter too, to get in on like the complete collection of issues 1 through 6 when it comes out later this year.